In the summer of 1690, the war between James II and William of Orange comes down the length of Ireland and stops at a walled city on the River Shannon. It is the last one the Jacobites hold. Its name is Limerick. The images in this film are AI-assisted reconstructions, attempts to make visible a siege and a city that time has erased. Small imperfections may appear, but they let us walk through a Limerick that no longer stands. This is the story of two sieges, one night ride, a bridge where the gates were shut on men who were running for them, and a treaty signed on a block of stone by the river. A treaty whose terms were generous, whose ink was barely dry before it was broken, and which gave a city the name it still uses for itself 3 centuries later. By August 1690, the war is all but decided. James II has lost at the Boyne and sailed for France. Dublin has fallen, and what is left of the Jacobite army has pulled back across the Shannon into Munster. Limerick is what the Jacobites have left. The city stands on an island in the river with a Norman castle at the crossing, and its walls are medieval, high, thin, and built for an age before heavy artillery. The Duke of Lausanne, commanding the French troops sent to help James, looks at those walls and remarks that they could be battered down with roasted apples. He advises abandoning the place altogether. The Irish officers refuse to leave. On the 7th of August, William of Orange comes before the walls with 25,000 men, expecting the business to take days. What he does not yet know is that his siege guns, the heavy cannon that will actually decide the matter, are still strung out on the road behind him, coming up from Dublin under a light escort. A cavalry officer inside the city hears about those guns. Patrick Sarsfield is Irish, and by the reckoning of the army, he is not the senior man in Limerick. What he has is nerve. On the night of the 10th of August, he takes 600 horse out of the city, crosses the Shannon far upstream where nobody is watching, and rides a wide arc through the hills behind the Williamite lines, guided by a local rapparee, whom Ireland remembers as Galloping Hogan. They find the siege train camped at Ballyneety, a few miles short of Limerick, its escort asleep and its sentries slack. In the dark of the 11th, they take the camp, ram the powder into the mouths of the guns, and blow the entire train into the ground. William has to send to Waterford for another one. It costs him the better part of a week, and in Ireland, in August, a week is the difference between a siege and a rainy season. The replacement train comes up, and the bombardment begins in earnest. By the 27th of August, the guns have opened a breach in the wall on the Irish town side, and William sends his Danish grenadiers into it. What they find behind the breach is not a way in. Boisleau, the governor, has used the days Sarsfield bought him to throw up a second earthwork inside the wall and barricade the streets beyond it. So the storming party comes through the gap and straight into a trap. The defenders hold that inner work, and the townspeople line the walls above and hurl down stones and bottles, the women of Limerick among them, and remembered for it ever since. The fighting lasts 3.5 hours. When William calls it off, he has taken close to 3,000 casualties, many of them from his best Dutch, Danish, German and Huguenot regiments, the worst day his army has in Ireland. Days later, with the season turning against him, he lifts the siege and withdraws into winter quarters. He leaves Ireland soon afterwards and never comes back to it. The walls that were to be knocked down with roasted apples have held. If this reconstruction of Limerick's past speaks to you, consider becoming a channel member. Your support is what keeps these lost worlds being rebuilt, frame by frame. The reprieve lasts a year and ends in a field in County Galway, 40 miles to the north. On the 12th of July 1691, the Jacobite army meets the Williamites at Aughrim, and the day goes catastrophically wrong. Their commander, a French general named Saint-Ruth, is killed by a cannonball at the moment his line is holding. The army comes apart without him, and the retreat turns into a slaughter. Aughrim is the bloodiest day ever fought on Irish ground. After Aughrim, there is no field army left in Ireland. There is only the city on the Shannon. On the 25th of August, the Williamite commander Ginkell comes before Limerick with an army of 25,000, English, Scottish, Danish and Dutch. Inside are perhaps 14,000 men, Sarsfield among their senior officers, and a French contingent whose generals hold the command and have long since stopped agreeing with the Irish about anything at all. For a month, the guns work at the walls and the city holds. Then, on the 22nd of September, the Williamites get across the Shannon and storm the earthworks covering Thomond Bridge, on the bank opposite the town. The Irish holding those earthworks are driven back onto the bridge, and they run for the gate at the city end of it. The gate does not open. The French officer commanding it, seeing the pursuit coming on behind the crowd, orders the drawbridge raised with his own allies still on the wrong side of it. Some 800 men are lost there, against their own gate or in the river beneath it. That bridge stands a few dozen paces from the spot where the treaty will be signed 11 days later. Whatever was left of the alliance between the Irish and the French inside Limerick ends at that gate, and it is Sarsfield, not the French generals, who opens negotiations with Ginkle. Sarsfield sets the French commanders aside and treats directly with the enemy. What he obtains on the 3rd of October 1691 is remarkable for an army that has lost. The civilian population of Limerick is to be protected. The Catholic religion is to be tolerated, as it had been under Charles II. Catholic landowners are to keep their estates, and the Jacobite army may march out of the city, fully armed, and take service with the King of France. By tradition, the articles are signed on a rough block of limestone lying by the water at the Thomond Bridge end of the city. That stone is still there. The city surrenders with its terms in its hand, and for a few weeks it looks as though the war has ended in something other than a defeat. Then the army goes. Sarsfield sails from the Shannon with some 10,000 soldiers, and 4,000 women and children go with them into the service of France. Ireland remembers it as the flight of the wild geese, and very few of them ever come home. Sarsfield does not. He is shot through the chest at Landen in Flanders in July 1693, dies of the wound 3 weeks later at Huy, and is buried in a grave nobody marked. Tradition puts words in his mouth as he falls, that he wished the blood had been shed for Ireland. The words are almost certainly invented. The wish behind them was not. And the treaty is broken. From 1695, the Irish Parliament begins passing the penal laws, and in 1697 it declines to ratify the treaty at all. Catholics may not carry arms, enter the law, or buy land. A Catholic estate must be divided among every son, while a Protestant one passes whole to the eldest. A law built to grind families smaller with each generation. Catholic landholding in Ireland stands at roughly a fifth of the country before the war. Within a decade, it is 14%, and by the end of the century, it is 5%. Limerick had surrendered on terms, and the terms were not kept.